Hey YouTube, we are back. It's Dane across from me, and we're using the Double Shot app. We're going to talk about a trucking company called Locomation that we're invested in, and there was just some big news on Locomation.
Yeah. So Locomation's been in stealth for, I don't know, probably 2 years. So they were doing a pilot program with a trucking company between Seattle and somewhere in Idaho. Going back and forth, literally just testing out their technology. Long story short, about a week ago, they announced that they got their first purchase order for about 1,100 trucks to do a form of autonomous trucking.
Yeah,
which is a gigantic deal for them.
It's a huge deal. It's a 1,000 trucks. Can't say how much that's worth, but it's funny to have one customer and.
It's significantly different.
The company's made. It's very different than some of the other companies we're in.
Enterprise software, where it's like $60 a month kind of thing.
Right.
We'll see. We'll continue to
a can of sparkling water.
Yeah.
You know, you got to sell a lot of
but it's
those.
a case. It's a case.
Yeah. But one installation in one truck is a very big number.
Yeah. It's a significant savings, especially on like a cost per mile basis, right?
Yeah.
In general, the shipping industry operates on something like a 3 to 5% margin, right? So tiny margins. You can sort of think like oil and gas, right?
Wow.
So, and if you go from 3% to 4%, that's a gigantic bump, right? And they're looking at 15 to 20% savings, like pretty much instantaneously to the trucking company.
You led this one. These guys are out of Carnegie Mellon originally.
Very, very well-known scientists. Researchers within the field.
And Carnegie Mellon is kind of the place for autonomous driving, right?
Yeah, their robotics department is sort of mecca, if you will, when it comes to autonomous vehicle research. I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 partners that he pulled away. I think it's 4 that he pulled away from CMU. He meaning Chetan, who's the founder and CEO, pulled away from CMU. They had all been running their own departments and programs and whatnot.
Right.
So they're all extremely experienced within the field of autonomous robots and whatnot, right? So.
And Carnegie Mellon, because of what's been happening with autonomous vehicles, is the word raped?
That's a harsh word. I would say they've been drained. A number of PhD students, etc., were sort of stolen, drained away from their programs, right? And
they're going to Tesla.
They're going to Waymo. They're going to insert big company name within autonomous vehicles. Especially back then, 2 years ago. Everyone was talking about immediately getting to tier 3 autonomous vehicles, right? Where they're completely autonomous. You don't have to do anything with them. They just drive to their location, etc. And we were introduced to Chetan. The thing that stood out to Alex and I immediately was that there was a very sort of rational way in which they were looking at the industry and saying, what can we do today? Like literally today, can we do today? And could we put that in market in a very short amount of time to sort of leapfrog everyone?
And we should describe what they do versus a fully autonomous truck. It's under the category of platooning, I think it's called, right?
Yeah. The way in which this works. So you'd think you spend $150,000 on or $200,000 on a brand new 18-wheeler. You want to use that piece of equipment as close to 24 hours a day as you can, right? But on average, the usage rate is somewhere between like 7 to 9 hours, I think, per day, something along those lines, right? Which is terrible, right? And
big difference.
A lot of that's because of regulations for good reason, which is you don't want somebody driving for 23 hours straight.
And in the old days, in my day, drivers would drive for 23 hours straight. And there was no way to regulate it. Today, it is so closely regulated. This is good news, actually. There are no drivers that have been up for 3 days on the roads.
So you've got a sort of poorly operated, not on purpose, of course, and not to their own fault, but poorly operated, capitally intensive business, right? Because you don't get to run your equipment 24/7, right? So I think at max you get 11 hours to drive, and that limit is set the minute you start driving. So it's not, I can drive for 5 hours, take a 2-hour break, and then drive for another 6 hours. It is, you get to drive within an 11-hour window. The way in which Locomation's operating,
and there's a driver's shortage. People don't know about.
So younger generations aren't sort of picking up the baton, if you will.
Not everybody saw BJ and the Bear.
Oh, Jesus.
You know,
this is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody.
For my generation, it was very romantic to get into a long haul truck.
Sure, Smoking the Bandit. Yeah.
Yeah, Smoking the Bandit, BJ and the Bear. Get in there with your chimpanzee and just
loving it.
Go cross country.
Loving it. Yeah. It's not an easy job. And so I think the average age of a long haul truck driver right now is something like 65, right? Wow. So there's a tremendous shortage of individuals coming into the market, not coming into the market. The other thing that sort of bookends that is that it's the number one employer of men, right? And has been for a significant amount of time. Trucking. Yeah, it's a tremendous employer of individuals around the country. I'll wait for this.
Cue the truck.
Yeah. And so how does Locomation system differ from everybody else, right? So what Locomation said, what their founding team member said was, well, what if we did a sort of convoy system? So what if we put a car in front, a truck in front, that truck's being operated by an actual human being, right? So they're doing the thinking, essentially. Yeah. And then we put an autonomous vehicle behind that truck that can talk to that truck and see exactly what it's doing. We let a human do most of the thinking, and the following truck just follows, right? Mm-hmm. This allows then a driver to operate for close to that full 11 hours, right, to drive that entire time period. And then when that time period comes up, that truck basically gets overtaken by the trailing vehicle that essentially takes on the baton of driving. Mm-hmm. That driver wakes up or stops reading their book or whatever they've been doing. Mm-hmm. They take on in the lead position, and then the driver in back basically is asleep. And they get into that position, right?
Platooning hasn't been getting the attention that fully autonomous has, and it's in that press clipping, sort of like, hey, here's a hit for platooning. You know, we haven't heard about platooning in a while.
Yeah.
But platooning was the whole reason these guys did it. Was like, we're going to be able to come to market before autonomous trucks. It's happening. Yeah. Like their vision is happening.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, fully autonomous trucks, right? If you talk to the limited number of individuals on the face of the planet that actually know what they're talking about as it relates to AI, especially as it relates to autonomous vehicles, we'll tell you you're talking at least a decade out, right? And a large part of that is, where are you getting all of the data for this? How are you actually tracking and building a data set to create a service that's fully autonomous?
And that's one of the real advantages to trucking is you gave me some stats on how many miles one trucking route.
It's terrifying, right? Per day. I think there's one trucking route that goes from Chicago to Dallas. Forgive me if I'm totally wrong on this. And it has something like 2,500 18-wheelers from one company doing that route every single day.
Per day.
Right? Suddenly within a day, you have 2,500 trucks that have passed over that specific speed bump,
right?
That have seen that issue, right, over and over and over again. And so you get a really clear map of that road daily, right, of what's changing, etc., right, at scale. So one of the things that comes up with a lot of our tough tech related companies, and this came from one of the CTOs of one of our tough tech companies, is what he calls from spending billions of dollars within the aerospace industry for the government. Pre-scheduled miracles, right? So these are things that now Alex and I look for all the time, especially within deep tech, tough tech companies. How many pre-scheduled miracles do you have? Basically, are there material science things that we have to figure out? Are there specific road bumps and hurdles that we know are going to come up that we know are in the development timeline that no human has ever done before?
Yeah.
Do they suddenly have to have an entire library of SKUs of hardware that they have to build themselves? And it turns out no, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, everything that they need for the most part is off the shelf. Right.
This brings up the one concern I have had. So when you've got people that have spent their careers in academia, mm-hmm. they're not exactly like the typical entrepreneur that we look at. Mm-hmm. They're almost too sensible, mm-hmm. almost too practical, mm-hmm. know too much to be that visionary that just knocks down every barrier and makes it happen. Their bet is actually, we can get to here, but it's going to be too hard to get to here.
Yeah.
It's very academic.
Yeah.
I know that you cramp on that a little bit too, or wonder about it. Like, how, what was the deciding factor with this investment where we felt like, no, this is the right team?
The thing that separated Chetan and Locomation, in my opinion, was clearly he knew, within minutes you can tell, he knows everything about this industry. But then to find out that he's pulling away 4 or 5 of his friends, right, his coworkers from CMU, each of whom have unbelievably deep vertical experience within something for autonomous vehicles. He had that dialed. Under normal circumstances, we'd be like, okay, Chetan, you got to go out. You're going to start this business. Now you're going to have to raise another $20 million, let's say, over the course of the next 2 years in order to find these people. And you're competing with enormous businesses already that are just hemorrhaging money into these verticals. How are you going to be able to compete on that side, right? So for me, at least, when it came to him and his founding team was, holy cow, he is so far ahead of the game because he's cherry picking. He's pulling people that the other competitors couldn't actually get. They couldn't force them to do it, right? They're like, no, I don't want to leave, but for Chetan, I'll leave. That is a tremendous sign, at least from my perspective, in terms of the ability to actually build.
Yeah. This is one of those companies where, and they happen in tough tech, they don't happen in water, where there's enough intellectual property that the day you invest, you know that if everything goes sideways and they just sell off some of the IP,
there's certainly the sensation.
You're probably getting your money
There's
back.
certainly the sensation of that.
I don't know that it plays out that way, but there is that
The founding
feeling.
team alone is worth a weight in gold, right? In terms of, okay, whatever they've been learning together as one, they've been working at CMU, but two, as they continue to build this company, is worth a tremendous amount to a number of large companies, right, who are operating in the same space.
But you don't, as an investor, if the team leaves, you don't usually participate in that.
No, no, yeah. Well, I just mean in terms of buying the business, right? Of saying regardless of what the sales look like.
The other big trucking war is Tesla, and how does this relate to that?
Electric trucks. I'm very, very, very interested in it because Tesla wouldn't have talked to them in the very beginning. And now I think Tesla is going to just do everything they can to buy Locomation because he wants the team and the tech. Because you take what they've already done and you throw that in an electric vehicle, and it's like Walmart just signed with Tesla's trucks. Did you see that?
No.
They just did a purchase order for a couple hundred trucks, and it's like a giant deal in terms of the way people
are
talking about it.
Well, it seems like if you took this team and what they're doing and you brought it in your Tesla, Nikola's gone.
Dead.
Why don't you do the wrap up?
No, you do the wrap up. I'm not good at the wrap. No, because like you're...
Just say like and subscribe.
No.
Like and subscribe.
No. Go ahead.
Like and subscribe. That's all you have to say.
I'm not going to do it now.
Throw some comments down below and we'll try to answer. And we'll put in those links that Dane talked about. And we'll see you next time. And we'll talk about some other batshit crazy investments. So thanks for joining. Appreciate it.